I didn't buy you a gift. I bought gifts for your cousins. I'm out of money. That's what my mom said last Christmas, right in front of more than a dozen relatives, where she publicly refused to give my daughter a gift. Gemma's gift was nothing. At the same time, the other kids were holding brand new phones, gaming consoles, and all kinds of expensive tech gadgets. In that moment, I didn't cry, and I didn't scream. I only did one thing that left the entire family speechless. But that wasn't all. Christmas was also the day I chose to expose the true face of my brother Preston. The golden child that the whole family always protected, the one everyone believed was a successful businessman, when the truth was completely the opposite. Before I get into the details of the story, thank you for choosing to listen to my story today. Hello everyone, I'm Weston, 34, working as a senior software engineer at a tech company in Houston, Texas. The story I'm telling today happened this past Christmas, the day I realized a painful truth: blood doesn't always mean family. I'm a single dad raising my daughter Gemma on my own. She's 8. My wife Claire died of cancer 3 years ago. I still remember like it was yesterday. The last week before she passed, Claire gripped my hand tight, her voice weak but determined. Promise me you'll always protect her. Never let anyone make her feel like she doesn't deserve to be loved. I promised. And for the past 3 years, I thought I kept that promise. My income's pretty high, but I live. I don't like showing off. Don't buy fancy cars or designer stuff. The money I make, part goes to Gemma, part goes to savings, and a big chunk I've been quietly supporting my family without anyone knowing, or more accurately, without anyone wanting to admit it. But after that Christmas dinner, I reconsidered every debt, and I decided it was time to collect every single penny. As for Gemma, every holiday, she's always the grandchild who gets treated differently. Cheapest gifts, least attention, like she's just a shadow in the crowd of relatives. I used to think staying silent was the way to keep the family together. I told myself Gemma was young. Gifts don't really need to have value. Just grandparents' love is enough. Things would be different when she grows up. I was wrong. Dead wrong. The week before Christmas, Gemma and I sat in the living room, wrapping gifts for everyone. It was cold outside, but inside was warm with the smell of hot chocolate and Christmas music playing softly from the little speaker. She sat cross-legged on the floor, carefully tying each bow, writing each card with her wobbly kid handwriting. Now and then, she'd stop, tilt her head to think about what else to draw to make it prettier. Right after tying the last bow, Gemma looked up, her eyes sparkling. Dad, I hope everyone likes their gifts. Looking at my daughter, my heart felt hot. I smiled and patted her head. I didn't expect those very gifts would become what I'd use to protect her. Around 10 in the morning on Christmas Day, Gemma and I loaded the gift bags into the car. She sat in the back seat, legs swinging, excited like any other kid on the most special day of the year. She was dressed nicely, hair neatly combed, eyes bright with excitement about seeing Grandma, Grandpa, and the relatives. But halfway there, Gemma suddenly went quiet. I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw her looking out the window, thoughtful, more mature than her age. Then she spoke up, voice small, as if she were afraid someone might hear. Dad, will Grandma forget to hug me like last year? Hearing that question, my heart felt like someone was squeezing it. An 8-year-old shouldn't have to ask a question like that. And that's when I realized she always remembered. Every action, every look, every bit of different treatment, she noticed it all. She didn't say anything because she thought talking wouldn't change anything. I didn't know how to answer, just tried to keep my voice steady. No matter what, I'll always have a gift for you. Gemma was quiet for a moment. Then she said softly, voice so sad I had to fight back tears. I don't need expensive gifts, Dad. I want Grandma to hug me like she hugs the other kids. I want her to ask me how school is, what I like, and what I don't like she asks Bryce and Sloan. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly. My nose started to sting. I wondered why it was like this, why my family treated Gemma this way. But I had no idea that in just a few hours, the answer would become clearer than ever. We arrived at my parents' house, Barrett and Jolene's, in a quiet suburb west of Houston. The 2-story house was lavishly decorated, with a big Christmas tree by the window, twinkling lights running along the porch, and wreaths hanging on the front door. From the outside, it was the perfect picture of a happy family celebrating Christmas. Preston's car was already there, that shiny black BMW X5. And I knew exactly where the money for the monthly payments came from after his troubles. It came from the account I set up for him to use in emergencies. Walking into the house, Preston stood in the middle of the living room, in a black suit, with a shiny watch on his wrist, chatting cheerfully with some relatives. As soon as Mom saw us, she walked over, but not to me. She went straight to Preston, hugged him tight even though they'd just seen each other less than 5 minutes ago. Voice full of love. "My son is here. I made those grilled ribs you love." As for me, she just glanced over, nodded once. "Oh, you two are here." No hug, no asking how we were. Not a single "how are you" or "was the drive tiring?" But Gemma still stepped forward, politely said, "Hi Grandma, Merry Christmas." My mom looked down at her, said a quick yeah, then immediately turned to Noelle, Preston's wife, her voice switching to excitement. "Oh my God, your dress is gorgeous. Where'd you get it? Must have been expensive, right?" I stood there, watching my daughter. The smile on her lips faded like a candle blown out by the wind. But she didn't cry, didn't react. She quietly hung her head, then walked to the corner of the sofa by herself, sat down alone, hands appropriately placed in her lap. Seeing her sitting there all curled up in the corner of the crowded living room, my chest tightened. Lunch went by with Preston's stories. He talked about his new job, the initial difficulties, how things were gradually stabilizing, and plans to buy a bigger house next year. His voice was full of confidence, as if everything was under control. My mom listened like she was hanging on every word, occasionally feeling sorry. "Poor son, you work so hard." Then she'd look at me reproachfully, as if reminding me to help my brother more. Dad just sat quietly, occasionally nodding in agreement. As for me, I just sat silently, smiling quietly to myself. That smile wasn't from joy, but from bitterness. Not because I was jealous, but because I knew the truth behind all those words. But I didn't speak up. Not because I was scared, but because I knew the truth couldn't be hidden forever. Sooner or later, that shiny coat of paint would peel off. I didn't expect that day would be today. The living room was more crowded than I thought. Besides Preston's family, there was Aunt Rosalie, my mom's younger sister, sitting in the corner on the smallest chair, as if trying to shrink herself so she wouldn't take up anyone's space. Uncle Franklin, my dad's younger brother, and his son Miles were also there, sitting near the entrance, the spot people easily forget about. They're always invited because of family tradition, but just looking at the seating arrangement, you could tell where they fit in this family's hierarchy. After lunch, my mom stood up, clapped her hands excitedly, voice all cheerful. "All right, time to open gifts. Kids, come over here." Preston's 3 kids rushed to the Christmas tree like little tornadoes, pushing and shoving to find the boxes with their names. Laughter, shouting, voices filling the room. Gemma was different. She got up slowly from the corner of the sofa, where she'd been sitting alone after lunch. Her steps were gentle, careful, like she was afraid of bothering anyone. But I could still see her eyes light up with a ray of hope. What kid doesn't like gifts? Gemma was no different. Bryce, 12 years old, ripped open the first package. The kid screamed when he saw what was inside. PlayStation 5. Awesome. Thank you, Grandma and Grandpa. Sloane, 10 years old, opened the following box. Pink iPhone 15 and AirPods. She hugged Grandma tight, voice sweet. "Grandma, I love you." My mom stroked her granddaughter's hair, voice sweet as honey. "My prettiest granddaughter has to have the prettiest things." Cody, 7 years old, the youngest of the 3, opened the last box. Nintendo Switch and a Lego Technic Lamborghini set. The kid jumped up and down. Preston patted his son's head, voice full of pride. "My son's so smart." I sat there, quietly calculating in my head, over $2,200 in gifts from Grandma and Grandpa for Preston's 3 kids. Among the rustling wrapping paper and cheering, Gemma quietly walked to the Christmas tree. She bent down, eyes looking around at the pieces of wrapping paper scattered on the floor. Her small hands turned over each piece of paper, searching and searching for her name and searching for proof that someone remembered her. Nothing. Not a single gift with Gemma's name on it. She stood up straight, face trying to stay calm, but I could clearly see her small shoulders trembling slightly. Then Gemma turned to Grandma. Voice so small I had to hold my breath to hear. Grandma, where's my gift? The whole room seemed to stop for a beat. The laughter and talking faded. My mom waved her hand when she heard the question. Voice casual. Gemma, I didn't buy you a gift. Your dad's rich, he can buy you whatever you want. I bought gifts for your cousins. I'm out of money. Immediately, Preston jumped in, voice all condescending, half smirk on his face. That's right, Gemma, just ask Dad to buy it. Your dad's a high-paid engineer, you're not lacking anything. Don't need Grandma's gifts. I turned to look at my dad. Barrett sat in his armchair. I still glued to the football game on TV. Like he didn't hear anything. Not a word of support. Not a single objection. Just silence. Complicit silence. Gemma stood there, arms hanging at her sides. She didn't cry, just nodded slightly, voice like a whisper. I understand. Then she turned around, quietly walked back to the corner of the sofa, sat down, hands appropriately placed on her lap, eyes looking down at the floor. Around her, the laughter gradually returned. Wrapping paper still rustling, Preston's kids loudly showing off their new toys. No one paid attention to her as if she didn't exist. I looked at my daughter. Looked at the red dress she chose because she thought Grandma likes red. Looked at the snowflake hair clip she wore because she wanted to look pretty for pictures with Grandma. Looked at her eyes. No longer hopeful, no longer disappointed. Just the empty acceptance of a child who's gotten too used to being abandoned. And in that moment, Claire's words echoed in my head, clear as if she were standing right next to me. For 3 years, I'd failed to keep that promise. I'd stayed silent too long, compromised too much, hoping things would get better on their own. But today that was going to change. The anger inside me didn't flare up like fire. It was cold. Cold as ice in a Texas winter. I stood up slowly and started walking toward the door. My mom looked up, called after me. Weston, where are you going? I didn't answer. I had something to do. I walked out of the house, the bitter cold of Texas winter hitting my face. I opened the trunk, pulled out the big red bag with all the gifts Gemma had helped me wrap the week before, then carried it back inside. But none of them would be getting these anymore. When I walked into the living room, Preston saw me and burst into mocking laughter, voice dripping with sarcasm. Oh, going to get gifts for your daughter? She's got money to buy her own stuff, why bother Mom and Dad? I didn't bother looking at him. I walked straight to the middle of the room, set the red bag next to the coffee table with a sharp thud. Seeing this, my mom frowned and asked, Weston, what are you planning to do? I didn't answer. Instead, I slowly pulled out the first gift and placed it on the table. A beige Gucci handbag, tags still on, sitting there under the twinkling Christmas lights. The whole room seemed to hold its breath. I spoke up, loud enough for everyone to hear. Work went well this year. Income increased significantly. So I bought a few things I know everyone's been wanting for a long time. I pointed to the Gucci bag and said, Gucci bag, $2,400. Mom saved this picture on Pinterest 6 months ago. Sent it to the family group chat with, if someone buys me this, I'll be so happy. Preston promised to buy it but kept putting it off. My mom's mouth dropped open, eyes glued to the bag, lighting up like a vulture spotting prey. I pulled out the tailor-made golf set, looked at my dad, and said, $1,800. You've been complaining all year that your old clubs are broken. For the first time, Dad took his eyes off the TV, looking at the clubs like he was seeing a dream come true. I placed a Tissot watch on the table, looked at Preston, and whispered, $650. 3 months ago you sent the link to the group chat, wrote, I wish someone would give me this. Preston swallowed, eyes glued to the watch. Finally, I pulled out the La Mer skincare set and Hermes scarf, looked at Noel and said, $900. Nearly $7,000 total lay out neatly on the table. The whole room was dead silent. I spoke up. Gemma helped me wrap each one, wrote cards for each person we were going to give them to, drew hearts and Christmas trees. She was so excited because she thought everyone would be happy getting gifts. I paused, swallowed the lump in my throat, and said loudly, but you all decided she doesn't deserve to get anything back. So I decided you don't deserve to get these either. After saying that, I picked up each card Gemma had made with all her love, then threw them all into the fireplace. The flames licked at the papers, burning them to ash in seconds. I stood there, watching my daughter's heartfelt work turn to ashes, and didn't feel a bit sorry about it. My mom shot up, voice pleading, "Weston, those are gifts for the family. You can't." I cut her off without thinking. "Family? Tell me what family is. Is it how you treat my daughter differently from the other grandkids?" My mom was speechless, her face going pale. I continued, "I bought these with money I earned, and I have every right to decide who they belong to." In that moment, my mom stood frozen, eyes still glued to the Gucci bag, like she was waiting for me to soften up and push the bag toward her like every other time. She didn't know that today, the man standing before her was no longer the old Weston. I took the Gucci bag and walked toward the corner of the room, where Aunt Rosalie was sitting. Every year, despite her struggles, she still sent Gemma birthday gifts. Every time we met, she asked how she was doing in school, what she liked, and what made her sad. She remembered Gemma liked purple, loved strawberry ice cream, and was afraid of the dark. Little things that her own grandparents never bothered to ask about. I stopped in front of her, bent down a little to be at eye level, then gently placed the Gucci bag in her hands and said, "Aunt Rosalie, this is my Christmas gift for you." She was stunned, eyes wide, looking at me, then down at the bag, voice stammering, "Weston, what kind of bag is this? It looks so expensive. I can't." I smiled, voice warm, "Just take it. I want to thank you for all these years of remembering Gemma. I really appreciate that." Aunt Rosalie shakily opened the bag, saw the Gucci logo inside, and almost dropped it. Voice choked up, "Weston, I can't accept this." I gently held her hand and whispered, "You deserve it. Please take it, it makes me happy." Right then, my mom shot up from the sofa, face red with rage, voice cutting in desperately, "Weston, that's my bag. You said you bought it for me." I slowly stood up straight, turned to look at her, voice calm. "I said I bought this bag. I didn't say who I was giving it to. Now I've decided to give it to Aunt Rosalie. That's my right." My mom was speechless, eyes glaring at her sister, who was trembling as she held the bag she'd been wanting for 6 months. I didn't stop there. I went back to the table, picked up the tailor-made golf set, then walked toward Uncle Franklin. He was the only one on Dad's side who called to check on Gemma after Claire died. My dad never called once. I stood in front of him, set the clubs down next to his chair, then said, "Uncle Franklin, I know you've always wanted to play golf but never had a chance to get good equipment. I'm giving you this set. Consider it a thank you gift for all these years of caring about Gemma." Uncle Franklin stood up, so surprised he couldn't speak, voice stuttering. "Weston, this is tailor-made. I can't." I smiled, "Just take it. I want you to have it." Then I turned to look at my dad, still sitting silently in his armchair, eyes looking down at the floor. I asked him, "Dad, do you want to say anything?" He stayed silent, just the same cowardly silence as always. I nodded, like I'd gotten the answer I needed, then turned back to Uncle Franklin. "Take it. You deserve it." Next, I took the Tizot watch from the black velvet box and walked toward Miles. Every time he visited Houston to see family, he brought little gifts for Gemma, sometimes candy bars from gas stations, occasionally tiny stuffed animals. Not expensive, but he remembered her. I handed the watch to Miles and said, "Miles, this is for you. Thanks for always bringing gifts for Gemma whenever you see her. She really loves you." Miles was surprised, looked at the watch, then at me, voice hesitant. This is a Tizot. I heard Preston saying he wanted." I shook my head, smiled. "I bought it. I can give it to whoever I want. Just take it." Right then, Preston shot up from the sofa, face purple with rage, voice roaring. "What the hell are you saying? That's my watch. You don't have the right." I turned around, looked straight into his eyes, voice cold as ice. "Yours? Since when? I paid for it. I decide who it belongs to. You got a problem with that?" Preston gritted his teeth, hands clenched, but couldn't say anything. He knew I was right. Miles quietly accepted the watch and tried it on. He didn't say anything, but the way he looked at Preston, I could see years of suppressed satisfaction in his eyes. Right then, the doorbell rang. Noelle got up to open the door, and Mrs. Whitmore walked in, the 70-year-old neighbor who lived alone in the house next to mine in Houston. She was carrying a plate of cookies, her wrinkled face breaking into a kind smile. Voice cheerful. I stopped by to wish everyone a Merry Christmas. Oh, where's Gemma? I have chocolate chip cookies she loves. Gemma jumped up from the corner of the sofa, ran over, and hugged Mrs. Whitmore tight. That was the first hug she'd gotten all day. Mrs. Whitmore bent down, stroked her hair, and asked about all kinds of things. Watching that scene, my chest tightened. I took the La Mer skincare set and Hermes scarf, walked over to Mrs. Whitmore and said, Mrs. Whitmore, I have a Christmas gift for you. Mrs. Whitmore was surprised, waved her hand. Oh, Weston, you don't need to. I just stopped by to wish everyone Merry Christmas. I smiled, gently placed the gift in her hands. You always bake for Gemma every week. You remember her birthday and bring gifts every year. You're a neighbor, but you treat Gemma like your own granddaughter. I want to thank you for that. Mrs. Whitmore looked at the gift in her hands, then at me, her old eyes welling up with tears, voice choked. Weston, thank you so much. She couldn't say anything else, just hugged Gemma close, wiping away tears. I stood there, looking at the scene before me, satisfied with myself. What about my blood family? My mom stood in the middle of the room, hands clenched, lips trembling. She looked at me, voice choked with anger and humiliation. Weston, you're embarrassing the family in front of outsiders. I looked at her, voice calm. No, Mom, I'm just showing everyone who really deserves to be valued. My mom stood there, eyes red, whether from anger or shame I couldn't tell. But I wasn't done yet. The real storm was beginning. I pulled my phone out of my pocket, opened the banking app, then held the screen up for the whole room to see. My voice rang out clearly. There's one more thing I want to talk about. Prada bag, $1,200. Preston ordered it from the emergency account I set up for him. The order was delivered 2 weeks ago. Noelle looked up, a flash of confusion in her eyes. She turned to her husband, voice hesitant. Prada bag? You bought me a bag? Why didn't I get it? I shook my head, voice calm. Not for you, Noelle. The order was sent to apartment 1504, Skyline Tower, downtown. Recipient name Harlow. The whole room seemed to freeze. No one said anything. The kind of heavy silence where I could hear the Christmas lights blinking on the tree, someone's rapid breathing, and Preston's kids whispering to each other in the corner, not understanding what was happening. Noelle slowly turned to her husband. Her face went white, lips trembling. Her voice broke into pieces as she asked, Who's Harlow? Preston shot up, face red with rage, screaming at me. He's lying. He's making it all up. I didn't say anything. I just stepped forward and held the phone screen right up to his face. On it was the detailed receipt. Order date, delivery address, recipient name, amount, everything clear as day. I asked him, voice cold as ice, Want to explain? Preston looked at the phone screen, then at me, eyes blinking rapidly. His voice stuttered, panicked. You've been spying on my account. I looked straight into his eyes. I created that account. I have the right to see every transaction. I paused a beat, then continued, voice steady like reading an indictment. Besides the bag, hotel bookings, 400. Restaurant for 300. All in the past 3 months. Want me to keep reading? Noelle stood up immediately, tears streaming down her cheeks. She looked at her husband, voice choked. Preston, 3 months? Preston turned to his wife, stepped forward to grab her hand, voice pleading. Listen, let me explain. It's just a misunderstanding. Noelle jerked her hand away, backed away like he was a stranger. I didn't give him a chance to make up more stories. My voice rang out cold. And that's not all. The BMW you're driving? I pay the monthly installments. The house you're living in? I paid 3 months' rent when the landlord threatened to kick your whole family out. I turned to look at Mom, voice dropping. He's been unemployed for 8 months. Mom. New job? There isn't one. Initial difficulties? Not those either. It's all lies to make you feel sorry for him, to keep defending him. The fancy car, nice house, designer stuff? Behind it all is debt, lies, and my money. My mom's mouth dropped open, voice lost, looking at Preston. Preston, tell me that's not true. Preston didn't answer Mom. Instead, he turned to me, face purple with rage, veins bulging in his neck, roaring, "Shut up. You don't have the right to humiliate me in front of everyone." I didn't back down an inch, voice sharp and cold. "I loaned you over $50,000 in 3 years. Not a single dollar paid back. I supported you, supported your family, and you used that money to cheat behind your wife's back. Who's humiliating who here?" That was the last straw. Preston roared and lunged straight at me, fist raised high. I saw the punch flying toward my face, but before I could react, a hand blocked it. Miles, my cousin, had stepped forward and grabbed Preston's wrist tightly, stopping the punch in midair. Miles looked straight into Preston's eyes, voice cold in warning. "Back off, before I call the cops." Preston yanked his hand free, screaming, "Who the hell are you to get involved in my family business?" Uncle Franklin also stood up, stepped over next to his son, voice deep but firm. "Back away, Preston. Don't do something stupid." Bryce, Sloan, and Cody, Preston's 3 kids, huddled together in the corner of the room, eyes wide with fear, watching their dad growling like a cornered animal. Sloan started crying, her sobs echoing desperately. Cody just stood frozen, face pale, not understanding what was happening. And Gemma, my daughter, was still next to Mrs. Whitmore. She held my little girl close, protecting her, like she wanted to shield her from all this chaos. Preston stood there, breathing hard, red eyes glaring at me. But with Miles and Uncle Franklin between us, he couldn't do anything. In the chaos, Noelle collapsed onto the sofa, shoulders shaking, crying silently. My mom looked from me to Preston to Noelle, like she couldn't believe what had just happened in her house. My dad still sat quietly in his armchair, but for the first time, he looked up at Preston with an expression I'd never seen before, deep disappointment mixed with shame. I stood in the middle of the room, took a deep breath, then spoke up, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Losing a few $1,000s today, that's the least of it. Money I can make more. But losing trust, losing respect from your own blood family, that's something you can never buy back. And today you all chose to lose it." After saying that, I looked toward the door. It was time to take my daughter and leave this place. The moment I got close, I gripped Mrs. Whitmore's hand tight and said quietly, "Thank you. Thank you for everything." Mrs. Whitmore looked at me, her old eyes welling up with tears. Then she squeezed my hand gently. "You don't need to thank me. Gemma's the sweetest child I've ever met. She deserves so much more love than this." Then she bent down, kissed Gemma's forehead, and whispered something in her ear. Gemma nodded, eyes red, then let go of her hand. I bent down, pulled my daughter into my arms, then lifted her. Gemma wrapped her arms around my neck, buried her face in my shoulder, like she wanted to hide from everything that had just happened. I whispered in her ear, "Let's go, sweetheart. We're going home." And that was also the moment I decided to cut ties with the people who called themselves family, completely, where they treated me like a doormat for so many years, where my kindness had been endlessly exploited, where my daughter was treated like she was invisible. I carried Gemma toward the door. Behind me, Aunt Rosalie, Uncle Franklin, Miles, and Mrs. Whitmore also stood up one by one, quietly gathering their things to leave. No one said anything. No one wanted to stay another second in that suffocating atmosphere. My mom's desperate voice rang out behind me. Something about how I should think it over, that Gemma needs her grandparents, that I was being selfish, that I'd regret this. But I didn't bother turning around, didn't bother responding. They'd crossed my final line, and that was Gemma. And when someone hurts my daughter, they no longer deserve to be heard. When we got back to our little house, where there was a Christmas tree that Gemma and I had decorated together, where the gifts I'd prepared just for her were neatly arranged under the tree, a place that wasn't as fancy as Grandma and Grandpa's house, but was overflowing with love, Gemma suddenly whispered, voice choked up, "Dad, I'm sorry. It's because of me that you had to fight with Grandma and Uncle Preston." Hearing her say that, my heart felt like it was being crushed. I turned and hugged her tight. "Listen to me. You did nothing wrong. The fault is with them because they don't know how to value us. If you're sad, you still have me. And those people who are at fault but won't admit it, they'll lose the people who really matter. Like how they lost us today." Gemma hugged me tight and whispered, "I love you, Dad." Maybe for her, Dad was all she needed. And for me, Gemma was everything too. That night, after Gemma had fallen asleep, I sat alone in the living room and decided to do something I should have done long ago. I opened my phone, booked 2 plane tickets to Colorado for the next day. As for the 3 cash gifts worth over $2,000 that I'd planned to give Bryce, Sloan, and Cody, I decided not to give them anymore. Instead, I used that money to buy toys, warm clothes, and candy for the kids at the orphanage. 2 days later, Gemma and I went to Colorado, spending Christmas in a little cabin in the middle of a snow-white forest. We joined volunteers on their way to the orphanage to give gifts to the kids. Gemma had never seen real snow before. She ran outside, screamed with joy, built a snowman, threw snowballs at me, laughed until she fell, then laughed some more. Watching Gemma play with those kids, being surrounded by them, her pure laughter echoing through the snowy forest, I knew she'd get through this. The wound would still be there, but she'd be okay because she had Dad. And Dad would always be there for her. Several months have passed since that Christmas. What about Preston? Noelle filed for divorce. She found more evidence of cheating on his phone after that night. As for me, I sent an official debt collection notice through my lawyer, demanding that he pay back the over $50,000 I'd loaned him over the past 3 years. Kindness has limits, and mine ended that Christmas night. My mom sent a letter saying she was willing to forgive if I apologized and came back. I read it and threw it straight in the trash. My dad hasn't contacted me. Complete silence. Just like how he'd been silent for all these years. But the people who genuinely value my daughter and me are still there. Aunt Rosalie calls sometimes to check in, sends pictures of her carrying that Gucci bag to parties with the caption, "Thank you. This is the most beautiful gift of my life. Mrs. Whitmore still bakes for Gemma every week, and she started calling her Grandma Whitmore. She cried when she heard that for the first time. I learned that family isn't about sharing blood. Family is about people who choose to love you unconditionally, without judgment, without keeping score. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's self-respect. Protecting your child from toxicity, whether it's grandparents, aunts, uncles, or anyone else, isn't cutting off family ties. It's fulfilling your parental duty. If my story can help you, I want to leave you with 3 things. First, recognize the signs of toxic relationships, even when they come from family. People who genuinely love you will never make you feel like you're not good enough. Second, don't sacrifice your dignity and your children's dignity to maintain so-called family harmony. Harmony built on injustice isn't harmony. It's submission. Third, people who genuinely care about you will show it through actions, not words. Cherish them, whether they're strangers or blood relatives. If you were in my situation, family treating your child like they don't exist while you're the one quietly supporting them, would you dare to stand up? Or would you keep staying silent to keep the peace? If this story touched your emotions, please share your thoughts in the comments. I read everything and really want to hear your opinions. Don't forget to like and subscribe to support me. Thank you for listening to my story. Goodbye and see you in the following stories. What would you do if your parents threw $200 in your face, then pushed your 4-year-old daughter out the door in the middle of a snowstorm, saying, "Get out. You two are the shame of this family"? I became a father at 17. I lived under my parents' roof for almost 20 years of my life, and I never loved my own flesh and blood, not even a little bit. Finally, I realized karma doesn't need anyone to make it happen. It finds its own way. It knocks on its own door. And when it comes, it doesn't knock gently. For years after that night, karma caught up with my family. It came at precisely the right time, the most painful time, and it was spot on like some prophecy. When that circle closed, someone fell to their knees, someone stood up, and those $200 finally found their way back home. Before I get into the details of this story, let me thank you. Thank you for taking the time to follow this story. I hope you have a great day. Could you give me a like if you want to wish me the same? Hello everyone. I'm Derek, 26. This story starts when I was 17, stupid, and had just gotten a girl pregnant. Megan, my classmate girlfriend, has brown hair, a cute smile, and is just as thoughtless as I am. 2 kids playing grown-up games, then getting rewarded with a pregnancy test showing 2 lines. That day at Denver Memorial Hospital, I stood looking at Ivy through the nursery window. The baby was all red and wrinkled, crying like the whole world owed her money, waiting for that sacred feeling people talk about, that intense father-child bond you see in movies. But there was nothing. Just felt like someone had just handed me a ticking time bomb and said, "Good luck." Megan looked at the baby exactly once, her eyes empty, as if she were staring into space. The next morning, her hospital bed was empty. She disappeared without a word. At 17, I learned my first lesson about being a father. Sometimes your partner runs away before the race even starts. I brought Ivy home to my parents' house in suburban Denver because I had no other choice. The moment I walked through the door, my dad, Richard Walker, eyes still glued to the TV screen, dropped a cold line. "You raise her, but don't let her bother us." And my mom, Sandra, looked at me with eyes that I later realized were disappointment that had frozen into habit, then added, "You need to learn to take responsibility for your actions. This is a consequence, not a reward." And so 4 years of hell began. At 17, I didn't know how to make formula at the right temperature. Didn't know why babies cry at 2 a.m. There were nights when Ivy screamed until she was hoarse, and I'd sit on the floor in the corner, my ears ringing, wondering what I was doing with my life. Once I was playing online games with friends. I turned around to find Ivy lying on the carpet, diaper soaking wet, the smell hitting me. Meanwhile, my parents' dog was lying comfortably on the couch, getting petted every day, and was called by cute nicknames. Ivy, Grandma and Grandpa rarely looked her straight in the eye. In the house where I was born, which also became my daughter's starting place, Ivy lived by unspoken rules that no one needed to state aloud. When guests came over, she had to stay in her room. She was a secret that needed to be kept, a stain that needed to be covered up. Every time the doorbell rang, Ivy would automatically stand up, quietly walk to the room at the end of the hallway like a programmed reflex. That room was right next to the storage room, as far from the living room as possible. Musty smells drifted around, and weak light filtered in through a small window. It was the corner that the whole family tried to forget existed. Ivy ate after the whole family finished eating. Alone in the kitchen, the sound of her spoon hitting the plate echoed in the space. At 4 years old, she already knew how to scoop up cold food by herself, no demands, no complaints, and absolutely couldn't call her grandma in front of outsiders. My mom made it clear, her voice gentle but sharp as a knife. "Just call me ma'am. Sounds like a neighbor, easier to explain." Meanwhile, Connor, my younger brother, lived a completely different life. For his 18th birthday, he got an old BMW and parked it right in the driveway. In the summer, he flew to Europe with friends on his parents' money. Weekends, he brought his girlfriend home for dinner, and his mom cooked his favorite barbecue ribs. And me, I delivered pizza on Colfax Avenue, paid $400 rent every month, and mowed the lawn every week. That's how I grew up, after 17 years of them waiting for a perfect child and getting a young father carrying an unwanted granddaughter. But the most painful part wasn't me. The most painful part was watching Ivy slowly disappear. At 2 years old, she babbled a few words, then went silent. At 3, completely quiet. At 4, Ivy moved through the house like a shadow. She learned that silence was the only way to avoid being yelled at, to avoid being looked at with annoyed eyes. The pediatrician on Colorado Boulevard said she needed a psychological evaluation, speech therapy, and early intervention. I didn't have money, didn't have time, and honestly didn't have enough concern. My mom heard this, shrugged her shoulders, nodded, and concluded, the girl's developmentally delayed. Got it from her mother, obviously. I didn't argue because I didn't know Ivy well enough to know what was wrong with her. Looking back now, sometimes I want to go back and slap that 17-year-old kid in the face. Ask him, do you know what she needs? Not a formula, not dry diapers. She needs you to look her in the eye and say, "I love you." That's it. But I didn't do that. For 4 years, I didn't do that. After everything, I'm still grateful they let us stay in the beginning. At least it was a roof over our heads, even if it was cold. But that very kindness was what made Ivy grow up without the bright smile that other kids her age had. Until Christmas night, when Ivy was 4, the night everything collapsed, and ironically also the night everything began. On Christmas night, the house on Peoria Street was livelier than ever. The smell of roasted turkey from the kitchen, mixed with social chatter, and that expensive perfume my mom only wore for essential guests. I was 21, 4 years of being a father not completely meaningless. Even though I didn't love her the right way, I'd gradually learned a few things about Ivy. I knew she was scared of thunder. I knew she'd jump when people talked loudly. I knew she liked sitting alone in the corner more than going outside. Not because I cared, but when you live in the same house, whether you want to or not, some things soak in. The tall Christmas tree stood in the middle of the living room, sparkling with glass ornaments that my mom liked to brag were collected from Europe. I stood in the kitchen helping carry dishes to the table, trying to look useful so I wouldn't get nagged after the party. Like always, Ivy was upstairs in her room. But that day, some distant aunt suddenly turned to my mom and asked, "Where's your granddaughter? I heard she's 4, but I've never met her." My mom smiled, that social smile she'd practiced thousands of times, then turned to me and lowered her voice. "Call the girl down. 30 minutes. Then take her back up." I went up to Ivy's room. She was sitting in the corner of the bed, holding that worn-out teddy bear I'd bought at a garage sale last year. When she saw me, Ivy looked up, big eyes waiting, but didn't ask anything. I sat down next to her and said softly, "Come downstairs for a bit. Some guests want to meet you. I'll be right there with you, don't worry." Ivy nodded, her small hand grabbing my finger as we went down the stairs. Other times, I would have pulled my hand away because I was busy looking at my phone. But that day, I left it alone, maybe because I was getting a little less terrible, or perhaps just because I was too tired to resist anything. As we walked past the living room, Ivy suddenly stopped. She stood frozen, eyes glued to the Christmas tree, the blinking lights reflected in her wide eyes, and I realized this was the first time she'd been allowed to stand this close to the tree. Then I heard a sound that made my heart skip a beat. "Pretty," just one word, raspy voice, weak, but Ivy had spoken. After months of silence, she'd said a word. I was about to bend down, about to say something to her, when a hand slapped my shoulder. Some uncle or whatever, reeking of alcohol, started asking about work, about my future, about when I'd get a decent job instead of delivering pizza. I couldn't ignore him, not out of politeness, but because my mom's eyes were watching from across the room. When I turned back, Ivy had let go of my hand. She was walking toward the Christmas tree, step by slow step, as if that light was pulling her in. "Ivy," I called, but the Christmas music was too loud, or maybe my voice was too quiet. Ivy's foot got tangled in the light cord. Instinct made her hand reach out and grab the closest thing, a tree branch, and the whole tree came crashing down in the sound of shattering glass. I rushed over, pulled her out of the wreckage. A few scratches on her arm, not much bleeding, but what made my chest feel like someone was choking me was Ivy's face at that moment. She lay there among the broken glass pieces, lips moving like she wanted to say "I'm sorry," but no sound came out. My mom handled the situation instantly, laughing loudly with the guests and saying, "Kids, it's nothing, everyone." I carried Ivy into the kitchen like we were escaping, got a towel to clean her scratches, then said quietly, "It's not your fault. I know it." Ivy looked at me, eyes like she couldn't believe what she'd just heard, but neither of us knew the real storm had actually begun. 10 minutes later, my mom appeared at the kitchen door, face hard as stone, signaling for me to follow her to the backyard. My dad was already standing there waiting. Next to him were 2 neatly packed bags. I looked at those bags, and a cold feeling ran down my spine. They'd prepared this in advance, just waiting for an excuse. My mom opened her wallet, pulled out some bills, then threw them on the ground right in front of me, her voice flat. $200. Enough for a few nights at a motel. My dad looked straight into my eyes, and for the first time in my life, I saw nothing in his eyes, just emptiness. Like I didn't exist, Then he said each word slowly. Get out. You two are the shame of this family. Don't ever come back. Connor appeared at the back door, arms crossed, leaning against the door frame, flashing a smile I'll remember for the rest of my life, saying loudly, Merry Christmas, big brother. The door slammed shut, the lock clicked, and that was it. No arguing, no tears, no loud family drama like in the movies, just the sound of jingle bells drifting out from inside, the chatter and laughter of guests, and two fathers and daughters standing in the backyard with 2 bags of stuff. I stood there watching those bills fluttering on the ground. At 21, I thought I still had time, but turns out, time was a luxury that people like me didn't have the right to own. Then I heard rustling next to me. Ivy was bending down, picking up each $20 bill. Her little knees touched the cold ground, tiny hands shaking, but she kept patiently collecting each bill. She picked up the money as if it were the most essential thing in the world, as if letting it blow away would make everything worse. Then Ivy stood up, walked over to me, looked up and held out the crumpled bills. And she opened her mouth, voice trembling, each word like she had to really try hard to get it out. Dad. Money. All blown away. That's when something broke inside me. Ivy stood in front of me, still holding out the money, waiting. Then maybe because she'd been waiting too long without seeing me react, she did something I never expected. She stepped forward and hugged my leg, squeezing tight. It wasn't a hug. It was a request for affection. It was the hug of a scared child, afraid that the only adult left beside her would also disappear. I slowly knelt eye level with her. Then I did what I should have done 4 years ago. I hugged Ivy, hugged her tight. She went stiff in my arms for a moment, like she wasn't used to this feeling. Then slowly, 2 little arms wrapped around my neck, squeezing back. And Ivy cried, not loud crying, but sobbing, like she'd been holding it inside too long and was finally allowed to let it out. I cried too, first time crying for my daughter. I'm sorry for everything, I whispered in Ivy's ear. I didn't know what I was apologizing for 4 years of indifference, for not protecting her, for letting her grow up not knowing what it was like to be loved, or for all of that put together. Ivy didn't answer, but she squeezed my neck tighter, and that was enough. At that moment, I didn't know that in just a few hours, we'd meet someone who would completely change both our lives. That night, I carried Ivy for almost an hour through the cold wind, $200 in my pocket, no car, no phone to call anyone, and I didn't know where to go. Finally, I stopped in front of an old building on Colfax Avenue, where a crooked sign hung that read Denver Crisis Center, open 24/7. Crisis Support Center, a place for people who had nowhere else to go. Inside, yellow lights cast shadows on rows of plastic chairs lined against the walls. A few homeless people were dozing in the corner. A young mother holding a small child sat across from us, eyes empty, staring into space. The smell of pre-made coffee mixed with cheap disinfectant. I set Ivy down on a chair, and she rested her head on my shoulder, exhausted after a long night. Then I walked to the front desk to register for temporary shelter. The man sitting behind the counter was about 50, with salt and pepper hair, a weathered face but kind eyes. He was writing something down and didn't look up when I approached. I spoke up, voice hoarse from the cold. I need a place to sleep for my daughter and me. Just a few nights. The man looked up and stared at me for a long time. Then his eyes stopped on my face, and I saw him blink like he was trying to remember something, and I seemed to feel like I'd seen him somewhere before. He asked, voice slow, "What's your name?" I answered, "Walker." The man put down his pen and stared at me intently. Then he asked again, voice like he was holding something back, "Are you Richard Walker's son?" My heart pounded as I nodded and answered, "You know my dad?" The man smiled, the bitter smile of someone who'd tasted all of life's flavors, then said, "I'm Ben, Richard's brother, or used to be his brother, before they decided to erase me from the family." I stood frozen, couldn't believe my ears. An uncle. I had an uncle I'd never heard of. I thought I was dreaming, thought the cold winter night had made my mind hallucinate. But the yellow light still cast down on the floor, the heater still hummed, and Ivy still sat motionless on the chair behind me. Everything was real. Only my mind was spinning, trying to process that the universe had just thrown a relative I didn't know I had right in my face. If this wasn't fate, then I don't know what else to call it. Uncle Ben stood up, stepped out from behind the counter, and looked over at Ivy sitting motionless on the chair. Then he turned back to look at me and asked, "What happened?" I swallowed hard, tried to keep my voice from shaking, and told him everything, briefly. Uncle Ben was silent for a long time, just nodded slowly like he already knew this would happen, just a matter of when. Then he told me, voice soft like he was talking about someone else's story. 15 years ago, I chose to fix cars instead of following the family. Your parents called me the shame of the family, then erased my name from everything. I understand that feeling, so now I volunteer here, helping people like I used to be. He looked over at Ivy, asked me, "What's wrong with the girl? Why is she sitting there like a statue?" I took a deep breath, then answered, "For years now she barely talks. Today was the first time she said a few words. The doctor suspects autism, but I don't have the money to get her properly examined." Uncle Ben looked at Ivy for a long time, his eyes softening. Then he turned to me, said like it was the most obvious thing in the world, "I have a small apartment above the auto shop I work at during the day, in Aurora. Not fancy, but it has heat and hot water. Come with me." I wanted to refuse, but then I looked over at Ivy, looked into her eyes that were drooping with exhaustion, and I swallowed all my pride, answered, "Thank you." Uncle Ben's apartment was above a small auto shop in a quiet alley in Aurora. The smell of motor oil drifted up from below, along with heat, and a couch wide enough for father and daughter. And there I started over, being a father. The first few days Ivy was still the same, sitting in the corner of the room, eyes staring into space, the outside world as if it didn't exist for her. But Uncle Ben did something no one had ever done. He didn't force Ivy to talk, didn't drag her to see doctors, didn't conclude she was slow or had problems. Instead, every evening, he sat down next to Ivy with an old children's book and read. His voice was deep, slow, and patient. Ivy didn't react, didn't look, didn't turn her head. But Uncle Ben kept reading night after night, like he had his whole life to wait. He hugged Ivy every morning when she woke up, every evening before bed. Gentle hugs, not demanding anything back. He talked to her like she was completely normal. "Ivy, look here, today I got red apples. Do you like apples? I just wanted to let you know that I'm not waiting for an answer. Not disappointed when silence answered back. Just love, patience, and waiting." I stood awkwardly, watching, not knowing what to do. 21 years old. No one had taught me how to love like that. One evening, Uncle Ben said to me while still stroking Ivy's hair, his voice not blaming, just gentle like he was stating a fact, "You don't know how to hug her because no one ever hugged you right. Not your fault. But now, you watch me do it, then learn for yourself." In the first month, Ivy started to change. One evening, Uncle Ben was reading when he suddenly made a funny face, and Ivy laughed. Just a small laugh that passed quickly, but it was the first time in my life I'd heard my daughter laugh. I stood at the kitchen door, throat choking up. The first year passed, and Ivy started running to hug Uncle Ben's leg every time he came home from work. She still didn't talk much, but she knew how to show affection in her own way. The second year, a miracle happened. One evening, Ivy took a pencil and a piece of paper, scribbled something, then gave it to Uncle Ben. He took the paper, looked at it, and his hands began to shake. I walked closer, looked down. On the crumpled paper, in the crooked handwriting of a 6-year-old, was a single word, Ben. Uncle Ben plopped down in his chair, eyes red, the paper still trembling in his hands. I cried too, standing like a tree in the middle of the room, tears streaming down without bothering to hide them. In 3 years of living with Uncle Ben, I learned more than in all the years I lived in my parents' house. He taught me that love doesn't need conditions, doesn't need the child to be bright or perfect. Just be there, be patient, and believe that someday, that love will be returned. Uncle Ben loved Ivy with the kind of love I never knew how to give. He taught me to be a father by being a grandfather, and day by day I learned from him, clumsy but trying. Then one night at the end of the 3rd year, what I'd been waiting for 7 years finally happened. 3 years passed, and I was no longer that 21-year-old kid sitting playing games while my daughter lay on the carpet with a soaking wet diaper. I started each new day with auto repair work in Uncle Ben's garage, hands calloused from wrenches and motor oil. Every morning, I got up at 6, made breakfast for Ivy, and walked her 3 blocks to the preschool that had a program for kids with speech delays. Picked her up in the afternoon, sat next to her and practiced writing at night. Life was simple, but for the first time, I felt like I was living instead of just existing. During those 3 years, I didn't contact my family. Not out of hatred, but because there was nothing left to say. They'd said everything that Christmas night. $200 and don't come back were the last words I heard from them. Ivy still talked very little. She only said a few words when necessary, like hungry, thirsty, or calling Dad when she needed me to help with something. But she never started conversations, never opened her mouth just because she wanted to share something. Language for Ivy was a survival tool, not a way to connect. Until that night, Uncle Ben sat by Ivy's bed like every evening, fairy tale book in hand, reading in his deep, steady voice. I sat next to him, folding the last pile of clothes for the whole family. Uncle Ben finished the last page, closed the book, bent down to kiss Ivy's forehead, then whispered, "Sleep tight, sweetheart." Then he stood up, back slightly hunched. Lately, he'd been complaining about back pain and joint pain, but always brushed it off when I asked. Getting old, aches and pains are normal, he'd say. I believed him because I wanted to believe. Uncle Ben walked toward the door, where I was standing, putting away clothes. Then Ivy opened her mouth. In a clear voice, "Ben, I love you." Uncle Ben froze in the middle of the room. I forgot how to breathe. In 7 years, Ivy had never voluntarily said a sentence to express feelings to anyone. And the first sentence she chose was for Uncle Ben. Not for me. Uncle Ben turned around slowly, like he was afraid any movement too fast would make that moment disappear. Tears rolled down his weathered face. This man I'd never seen cry, even after hearing him tell about 15 years of being abandoned by family. He knelt by the bed, took Ivy's small hand, voice trembling. "I love you too. I love you so much, Ivy." Ivy sat up, wrapped both arms around his neck, and hugged him tight. And she said more, voice small but clear, "Don't go. Stay with me." I stood outside the door, witnessing that scene, and something in my chest made me feel like I was choking up. Uncle Ben had done what I couldn't do in the first 4 years of Ivy's life. He loved her without needing her to do anything. Didn't need her to talk. Didn't need her to smile. Didn't need her to show anything. He just loved and waited. That night, after Ivy was fast asleep, I sat in the corner of the small kitchen, cold coffee going bitter in my hands. Uncle Ben sat across from me, silent for a long time before speaking. "You know why she talked to me first?" I shook my head. Uncle Ben looked straight into my eyes, whispered, "Because I never waited for her to talk. I loved her when she was silent, when she didn't look at me, when she sat curled up in the corner of the room. I didn't need her to give me anything." He paused, voice getting softer. "She can sense who really loves her, who loves her with conditions. Kids are sensitive, Derek. Way more sensitive than adults think." My tears fell. 24 years old, sitting crying in a cramped kitchen, and I wasn't ashamed. From that night on, I changed. Every evening, I was the one reading to Ivy, not Uncle Ben. My voice wasn't as good as his, but I read. Every morning, I hugged her for a long time before going to work and said I love you, not to wait for her to say it back, but because I wanted to say it. Every day, I practiced loving without expectations. And gradually, Ivy started talking more. Not just necessary words, but sentences just because she wanted to share. "Dad, today I saw a red bird. Dad, the teacher said I write nicely." Small, ordinary sentences to others, but to me, they were miracles. 6 months later, one evening, after I finished reading and was about to stand up, Ivy grabbed my hand and said, "Dad, I love you." I sat back down, hugged her close, and cried like a child. Uncle Ben stood at the bedroom door, watching father and daughter, nodded with a smile, then quietly walked away. I learned to be a father from a man who showed me that family isn't the people who gave birth to you, but the people who choose to stay when the whole world turns its back. But our time with him wouldn't last much longer. 2 months later, Uncle Ben got his test results from the hospital. He took the paper home, put it on the table, then sat down on the couch, looking out the window for a long time without saying anything. The world I just worked so hard to build started shaking from the foundation. Lung cancer. Final stage. The day I got the news, I was like a lost soul. Uncle Ben sat across from me in the small kitchen, voice calm like he was talking about the weather. I've lived enough. Chemo will make me die faster in pain. And that's how he chose to end it. Uncle Ben passed away on a late autumn night, just 6 months after I learned how to really be a father. During those final days, Ivy sensed something. She followed him around constantly, even when he lay breathing unevenly on the old bed, eyes looking out the window where the last leaf was falling. Ivy wouldn't leave either. She curled up next to him, hand gripping his tightly, like she was afraid letting go meant losing him. Witnessing that moment, I realized a heartbreaking truth. Uncle Ben was my blood, but to Ivy he was more than blood. At Uncle Ben's funeral, a gray-haired man named Solomon came to pay respects. He looked at me, then said quietly, "Hold on to it. They'll come looking for you. Soon. Not because they miss you, because they need you." At the time, I thought the older man was senile, but much later I understood. Those were the words of a prophet from someone who'd seen too many circles of karma in life. The Ivy's auto sign blazed bright under the Colorado sun. Ivy drew a little star in the right corner of the sign herself, telling me while coloring, because Uncle Ben liked stars, that I stood in the middle of the shop, breathing in the smell of fresh paint, familiar motor oil, and a new beginning. Uncle Ben left everything to Ivy in his will. The shop, the apartment, and even the old pickup truck. I was just the keeper, managing it until she was old enough. But I swore I'd turn this place into something she could be proud of. Opening day, I posted a picture on my profile. Father and daughter standing in front of the sign, Ivy grinning and throwing up 2 fingers, while I had motor oil all over my face, but smiled as I'd never smiled before. Short caption: Ivy's auto officially opens. Thanks to Uncle Ben for everything. Didn't expect the post to get shared everywhere. Strangers sending congratulations, old friends from high school suddenly remembering I existed. Regular customers stopped by to congratulate us. Neighbors brought cake and flowers, and a few of Uncle Ben's friends came to drink beer and tell old stories. 8-year-old Ivy ran around everywhere, bragging to anyone who'd listen. "This is the shop my grandpa left me." I watched my daughter laugh, silently said to Uncle Ben somewhere up there, "I did it, Uncle." My hand unconsciously touched my shirt pocket, where those $200 had stayed for 4 years. The bills were old now, wrinkled, but I kept them, like a scar, to remind myself never to forget. Late afternoon, the crowd thinned out. I was cleaning up plastic cups and paper plates when I heard a commotion outside the door. 3 figures walked in. I stood frozen, still holding the broom, and couldn't believe my eyes. My dad stood there, no longer wearing his usual expensive suit. My mom followed behind, no jewelry, hair messy, eyes swollen. She had to hold onto my dad's arm to stay steady. And Connor, my younger brother, stood in the back, head hung down, looking at the ground. I found out later what happened. The very morning after they kicked us out, my dad's 15-year business partner disappeared with all the investment money. The family company went bankrupt. The bank seized the house on Peoria Street, accounts frozen. In 24 hours, they lost everything. Solomon's words echoed in my head. "The day you stand on top, they'll fall to the bottom." My mom was the first to speak. She let go of my dad's hand, stumbled toward me, then broke down crying right in the middle of the shop. She grabbed my hands, voice choked and broken. "Derek? Son. Save us. We don't have anyone else to turn to." My dad stood behind her, shoulders slumped, eyes that were once sharp and cold now empty like a lost soul. He didn't say anything, just stood there, and that was maybe the scariest thing. For the first time in my life, I saw him broken. The whole shop went dead quiet. The people still there stood watching. Nobody said anything. The air conditioner running was the only sound filling the heavy silence. Then Ivy's voice rang out from the corner of the shop, innocent and clear. "Dad, who are they?" My mom cried harder after that question. Connor hunched over, and I saw scars on his leg, limping, probably an accident. My dad closed his eyes, jaw clenched tight. I looked at them, then remembered the scene from 4 years ago, and realized the wheel had come full circle. After a few seconds of silence, I reached into my shirt pocket and pulled out the bills that had yellowed with time. $200. I kept them for 4 years, close to my heart, like a scar that never healed. Then I took my mom's hand, gently placed the stack of money in her palm, and closed her trembling fingers around it. My mom looked down, recognized what it was. Her face went pale. I looked straight into her eyes, voice strangely calm. $200. Enough for a few nights at a motel, just like you said that night. Then I stepped back, looked at all 3 of them and continued. If I had one wish, I wish I had never been born as your child. My mom looked like someone had punched her in the chest. She stumbled backward, hands still gripping the money tight. My dad opened his eyes, looked at me, and for the first time, I saw tears rolling down his cheeks. Ivy stood behind me, silent. She didn't understand what was happening, but her small hand found mine and squeezed tight. And in that moment, I knew I'd made the right choice. My words had ended everything. I was no longer that silent child who swallowed shame and endured. No longer the cowardly father who let his daughter grow up like a shadow. I had changed, and they needed to know that. My parents and Connor left in silence. No arguing, no more begging. Maybe they understood that some things, once broken, can't be fixed. After the door closed, Ivy looked up at me, big round eyes full of questions. She asked, voice soft, "Dad, was that man like my grandpa?" I understood who she was talking about. To Ivy, Uncle Ben was her only grandfather. And to me, Uncle Ben was the only father I'd ever had. I bent down, stroked her hair, and answered honestly, "No, sweetheart, nobody's like your grandpa." That weekend, I took Ivy to Fairmount Cemetery, where Uncle Ben rests. Simple headstone, just his name and 2 trim lines. A man who lived with love, departed in peace. I sat down next to it and told Uncle about everything. I talked like he was still sitting across from me, nodding and listening, then pouring me a cup of hot coffee. Ivy sat next to the headstone, pulled out from her backpack that old fairy tale book Uncle Ben used to read. She opened the book, began reading aloud, her clear voice echoing in the quiet space. Once upon a time, I looked at my daughter, eyes stinging. When we stood up to leave, I caught a glimpse of a figure in the distance under an old oak tree. My dad. He stood there looking toward us, didn't come closer, didn't say anything. Maybe he came to visit Uncle Ben, the brother he'd disowned 15 years ago. Perhaps he was trying to make peace with the past in his own way. I didn't know, and I didn't need to know. I took Ivy's hand, turned, and walked away. After everything that happened, I learned 3 lessons I want to share with you. Lesson 1. If you're a parent, love your child through actions. Don't wait for them to love you first. Lesson 2. If you're in a toxic relationship, whether it's with family or anyone else, remember you have the right to leave. You don't owe anyone you're staying, not even the people who gave birth to you. Lesson 3. Forgiveness is for yourself to lighten your heart. But forgiveness doesn't mean you have to open the door for people to come back. You can let go of resentment while still keeping a safe distance for yourself. If I were you, would I have given back those $200? Or would you have completely forgiven them and welcomed them back? Please feel free to leave me a comment and let me know what you think. And if this story touched you in some way, please subscribe to the channel and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Thanks for staying until the end. I look forward to seeing you again.